This podcast is inspired by my inspiring friend, Julie. So this is a short one, but I love to see when the practice is being lived. And we talked about that in a previous podcast in which I talked about, not just intending or wishing to live with an open heart or talking about living with an open heart, but actually living with an open heart to people, to life, to all the goodness that's available to you. And she did that, right? And so most recently, my friend, when I have these meetings with friends, I ask them like, how would you have handled that before? Your commitment and being on this path. And I love hearing how they handle it differently now. And then they also talk about areas that continue to need work. And that's great too, because that's also inspiring. And I know with diligence, with commitment, that those areas will start to be transformed too. So in this particular case, my friend and her spouse had plans for a special time together. I think they were celebrating an anniversary. And so, but her spouse got called to a work trip in Chicago. And Julie 1.0 had been like, what about our trip? Like, what about this? And can't you reschedule it? And she didn't do that at all. And he had this great idea about, why don't you come with me on the trip? And when now it would mean that of the 4 days that they would be away, 2 of those days he was spent working, from early morning until late in the evening, sometimes at night. And 1.0 would have been like, why would I go on the trip? I'm not going to be able to see you anyway. But she didn't do that. She went to Chicago and he had to go and travel a day earlier. So I asked her, I said, Julie, so what was that like for you? And she's like, well, when I got there, I was so present to how 1.0 would have showed up. So, and the way that Julie 1.0 would have showed up is like, okay, you can't pick me up from the airport. Okay, I'm an adult. I got to take a cab. But oh my God, like I can take a cab or an Uber. But with these gas prices today, it's out of control. So she would complain about the gas price of taking an Uber. And it was raining when she got there. She didn't make a problem with that either. She's like, oh, it's raining. So her husband's like, just take an Uber. That way you can get dropped right off at the hotel and you won't have to walk from the train to the hotel. She's like, no, I can walk from the train to the hotel. And so she took a train. Like she had no anxiety about taking a train in Chicago, which she never done before. And literally, this is 2.0 in full effect. I mean, living with an open heart. This is what she's doing. So she takes the train. She gets there. She's in a hotel by herself, and she could have totally just sat in the room for the 2 days that he was in meetings, but she didn't. She went out and she explored. She, walked and she saw a musical festival and she saw art and she was down by the water. I mean, this is 2.0. She could have easily made a mess of that about what's not happening. And then in the evening, he had a work event to go to one night. And it was unlikely that she'd be able to attend. And she was cool with that. She didn't make a problem out of that either. She's like, okay, no problem. And then they called her and said, hey, listen, everyone says that, hey, it's okay if you come. Would you like to come? And she could have been like, no, I'm comfortable. I don't, I'm okay. I don't want to go. But she didn't. She showed up and she had a fantastic time when she got there. And she got to meet her spouse's colleagues. And this opened up another dimension in their relationship in which they could talk about. And there was now some connectedness to this part of his life. So I think the message here is that I'm telling this story in such a way that you can see how amazing it is, but it's amazing because Julie is committed to this path, and 2.0 is leading, helping her lead with an open heart. Now, I could have told a very different story, which could have been like how the trip was a problem. You get there, it's raining. They're not picking you up at the train. It's supposed to, from the airport. It's supposed to be your anniversary, and like there's got to be a makeup to this, and for missing out on this because of a trip. It could have been all of that. which is how most people normally go about their business. But at every turn, she was so aware that there was a choice about how she could experience that moment. And she chose the path that led to joy and led to peace. And so, Julie, thank you for inspiring me. Your example is going to stay with me for a long time. Julie 2.0.